The oncologist's words still echoed in my head 3 days later. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer with liver metastases. 4 to 6 months, maybe less. Dr. Martinez had delivered the news with practiced clinical detachment, but I saw the sympathy in her eyes when she looked at Sarah, my wife of 12 years, who gripped my hand so tightly her knuckles went white. "We'll fight this together," Sarah whispered as we sat in the hospital parking garage afterward, her voice breaking. "Whatever it takes." I believed her. God help me, I actually believed her. The first month was hell, but we faced it as a team. Sarah drove me to every chemotherapy session, researched experimental treatments online until 3 in the morning, and even convinced me to try the support group at the cancer center. She took over managing our finances, all of them, insisting it would reduce my stress. As a CPA who'd controlled every aspect of our financial life for 20 years, handing over that responsibility felt like losing a limb. But Sarah was right. I barely had energy to shower between chemo sessions, let alone balance checkbooks. "You need to focus on getting better," she'd say, stroking my bald head as I lay exhausted on our couch. "Let me handle the mundane stuff." The changes started small. New gym membership at an upscale facility across town, she claimed. Exercise helps me cope with stress. Designer clothes that cost more than my monthly disability check. She explained it as retail therapy, you know how it is. Evening meetings for a grief support group I'd never heard of. She said, "It's specifically for spouses of terminal patients." I was too sick to question any of it. The chemo made me nauseated, confused, and weak. Some days I couldn't remember if I'd taken my pills or what day it was. Sarah became my lifeline, my connection to the outside world, my everything. But sick men notice things healthy men miss. Like how Sarah's phone was always face down now, how she'd developed a password for everything, how she'd started working late at the insurance office, where she'd been a part-time receptionist for the past 3 years. When I asked about it, she explained, "They're letting me take on more responsibility. The money will help with medical bills." The day that changed everything was a Tuesday in October. I'd been scheduled for a 6-hour chemo session, but my white blood cell count was dangerously low. Dr. Martinez sent me home after just 2 hours with strict orders to rest and avoid infection. Sarah had dropped me off that morning, kissing my forehead and promising to pick me up at 4. I took an Uber home. Tom Bradley's silver BMW was in our driveway next to Sarah's Honda. Tom, our neighbor from 3 houses down, had been helping with household repairs since my diagnosis. Divorced father of 2 teenagers, insurance agent, all-around good guy who'd stepped up when his neighbor got sick. Instead of going inside, I stood in our backyard, trying to process what I was seeing. Then, I heard voices from our bedroom window. "Dr. Martinez said 4 months, maybe 6 if he responds to treatment." Sarah's voice carried through the window, but cold, clinical. Not the warm, supportive tone she used with me. "But honestly, look at him. He's already half dead. My kids are asking questions about why I'm here so much," Tom's voice replied, strained with frustration. "This waiting is killing me." I pressed myself against the house, my heart hammering despite the beta blockers I took for chemo side effects. "Once his life insurance pays out, we can move somewhere fresh," Sarah continued, matter of fact, discussing my death like a business transaction. "He won't be around much longer anyway. The cancer's doing our work for us." The world tilted. I gripped the windowsill to keep from falling, my legs suddenly weak from something other than chemotherapy. They weren't just having an affair. They were planning their future around my death. They were counting on it. I stumbled back to the front yard and called another Uber, my hands shaking as I typed the address for the coffee shop downtown. I couldn't go inside. Not yet. Not until I could think clearly about what I'd just heard. Sitting in that coffee shop, staring at a cup of tea I couldn't stomach, I realized something fundamental had shifted. The man who'd walked into that backyard was a victim. Sick, dependent, trusting. The man sitting here now was something else entirely. I was a CPA. I understood money, legal documents, insurance policies, and financial planning better than most attorneys. I'd spent 20 years analyzing complex financial situations, finding discrepancies, and solving problems that seemed impossible. Sarah was right about one thing. I wouldn't be around much longer. The cancer was going to kill me, but she was wrong about everything else. If I had 4 months to live, I had 4 months to ensure that Sarah's callous prediction about my death became the foundation of her own destruction. The next morning, I began my investigation with the methodical precision that had made me a successful forensic accountant. Sarah left for work at 8:30, kissing my forehead and reminding me to take my anti-nausea medication. I waited until her car disappeared down the street, then walked to my home office for the first time in weeks. My illness had given me the perfect cover. Nobody questions a dying man's need to organize his affairs, review financial documents, or spend long hours at home resting. What they don't expect is for that dying man to use his professional expertise to conduct a forensic audit of his own life. I started with our joint bank accounts, printing statements for the past year. Sarah had been managing our finances for 6 months, but I could still access everything online. What I found made my blood run cold, despite the fever that had become my constant companion. Unexplained cash withdrawals, small enough to avoid triggering alerts but consistent enough to total nearly $15,000 over 6 months. Credit card charges at restaurants I'd never been to, hotels in our own city when we lived 10 minutes away, and a jewelry store purchase for $800 that I'd never seen materialized as a gift. But the most damning evidence was in the search history on our shared computer. Sarah had been researching my life insurance policy benefits, printing out settlement information, and even consulting websites about spousal rights during terminal illness. The browser history showed she'd visited divorce attorney websites before ultimately settling on pages about life insurance payouts and probate procedures. She'd done the math. Divorce would give her half our assets, but leave her responsible for half our debts, including the mounting medical bills. Widowhood would give her the life insurance money, clear ownership of our house, and my retirement accounts, all free of debt. I documented everything, creating a spreadsheet that tracked every suspicious transaction, every unexplained absence, every inconsistency in her stories. My accounting background made me naturally suspicious of financial irregularities, but my terminal diagnosis gave me something I'd never had before: unlimited time to investigate and nothing left to lose. The surveillance was easier than I had expected. I ordered a voice-activated recorder online, placing it in our bedroom, hidden inside Sarah's jewelry box. I also set up a security camera app on an old smartphone, positioning it to monitor our driveway from the living room window. The first recording I captured was devastating. "He's getting worse faster than the doctors predicted," Sarah's voice, clinically detached as she spoke to Tom. "Dr. Martinez thinks maybe 3 months now. His cognitive function is declining." "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" Tom asked, his voice worried. "I can barely remember to take his pills," Sarah replied dismissively. "Yesterday he asked me the same question 3 times in an hour. The chemo is destroying his brain, along with the cancer." I wasn't experiencing cognitive decline. I was experiencing the careful, methodical focus that comes with having a clear mission and a limited timeline. But Sarah's comments revealed something crucial. She was documenting my supposed mental deterioration, probably for insurance purposes. I called my colleague Jim Morrison, framing my inquiry as a general question about fraud investigation techniques. "The key is establishing pattern and intent," he explained over coffee. "Single suspicious transactions could be explained away, but patterns show deliberate deception." "What about spousal financial abuse?" I asked carefully. "That's actually a growing area of white-collar crime," Jim responded, "especially in cases where one spouse has diminished capacity due to illness. The penalties are severe because it's considered elder abuse in many jurisdictions. You see, the breakthrough came 3 weeks into my investigation. I'd been tracking Sarah's movements and noticed she always went to the same coffee shop after her grief support group meetings. I decided to follow her, driving my own car for the first time in months. Through the window, I watched Sarah and Tom holding hands across a small table, their body language intimate and comfortable. This wasn't a new affair born from the stress of my illness. They moved together with the ease of an established couple. More importantly, I watched them spreading papers across the table. Insurance documents, real estate listings, and what appeared to be financial planning worksheets. They were planning their future together, using my death benefits as their business plan. That night, Sarah came home from her support group meeting emotionally distant but physically affectionate, as if she was overcompensating for her guilt. She made my favorite dinner and sat with me while I barely managed to eat 3 bites. "How was your day?" she asked, stroking my hand with what I now recognized as practiced sympathy. "Productive," I said honestly. "I've been thinking about our future." She looked confused, so I clarified. "Your future, after I'm gone. I want to make sure you're taken care of." Her smile was radiant and completely false. "Don't talk like that. You're gonna beat this." "Sarah, we both know I'm not going to beat stage 4 pancreatic cancer," I replied firmly. "I need to make sure my affairs are in order." "Of course," she said, squeezing my hand. "Whatever you need to do." What I needed to do was ensure that her callous words about my death became the foundation of her own destruction. My brother Marcus looked older than his 45 years when he walked into the coffee shop near his downtown law office. We hadn't spoken in 2 years, not since Sarah had convinced me that my family was jealous of our financial success. Looking back, I realized she'd systematically isolated me from everyone who might have questioned her behavior. "Jesus, David," Marcus said, sliding into the booth across from me. "You look like you're dying." "Because I am," I replied simply. "I'm sorry, I had no idea," he said, his expression softening. "Sarah never called, never said anything about you being sick." "Sarah's been handling communications with the family," I said carefully. "I need estate planning advice. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4, maybe 3 months left." Marcus's demeanor shifted from personal concern to professional focus. "What kind of assets are we talking about?" "House worth about $400,000, retirement accounts around $300,000, life insurance policies totaling $600,000, some investments, savings accounts." "And you want to make sure Sarah's protected?" he asked. "I want to make sure my assets are distributed according to my wishes," I said carefully. "Which may not be the same thing." I pulled out my phone and showed him a photograph. Sarah and Tom holding hands in the coffee shop, insurance documents spread between them. "I discovered my wife is having an affair. More than that, she's planning her future around my death benefits." "Jesus," Marcus said, leaning back in his seat. "How long has this been going on?" "At least 8 months. Started before my diagnosis." I showed him more evidence. Screenshots, financial records, a comprehensive file I'd assembled. "She's been systematically preparing for my death." Marcus's expression hardened. "David, what you're describing isn't just adultery. It's financial abuse, possibly fraud." "I know. I've been documenting everything." I handed him a flash drive. "I need your help. Not just as an attorney, but as my brother. I have maybe 3 months to protect everything I've worked for." Over the next 2 hours, Marcus outlined a comprehensive strategy that would achieve my goals while remaining completely legal. The key was using my terminal diagnosis as justification for aggressive estate planning. "First, we establish an irrevocable life insurance trust," Marcus explained. "You transfer ownership of your life insurance policies to the trust, removing Sarah as beneficiary. The trust pays benefits to your designated beneficiaries. I'd recommend your sister's children for their education." "Can Sarah contest that?" I asked. "Not if it's properly structured," Marcus replied. "Your terminal diagnosis actually helps here. Courts recognize that dying people have legitimate reasons to ensure their assets are protected." Marcus walked me through additional strategies: converting joint accounts to individual accounts, establishing a qualified personal residence trust for the house, creating a revocable living trust to avoid probate. Every step was justified by my medical condition and supported by legitimate estate planning principles. "The beauty of this approach," Marcus explained, "is that it's completely legal and defensible. Sarah can't claim you were incompetent. You're working with licensed professionals. She can't claim you were coerced. You're initiating the planning. And she can't claim ignorance. You'll be discussing estate planning with her." "What about the criminal aspects of her behavior?" I asked. "That's not my area, but I can refer you to attorneys who specialize in financial crimes," Marcus replied. "The evidence you've gathered could support charges for financial abuse, insurance fraud, and conspiracy." "I want both. I want to protect my assets, and I want Sarah to face consequences. Marcus leaned forward. There's one more thing. If Sarah is charged with financial crimes related to your estate, it could affect her ability to inherit anything at all. Most states have slayer statutes that prevent people from benefiting from crimes against their victims. That was interesting. I'd noticed that Sarah had been forgetting to refill my medications and providing doctors with inaccurate information about my symptoms. What if it was more deliberate? Marcus, I need you to coordinate with a private investigator, I said. I want every aspect of Sarah's conduct documented. If she's doing anything that could be construed as hastening my death, I want evidence. Marcus agreed to serve as my estate planning attorney and coordinate with other professionals. We scheduled meetings to execute the legal documents, all of which would appear routine to anyone who didn't understand the underlying strategy. As I drove home, I felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time since my diagnosis, I had a clear plan and professional support. Sarah thought my illness made me weak and dependent. She was about to discover that it had made me focused, methodical, and completely committed to justice. My latest scans showed what Dr. Martinez had feared. The cancer had spread to my bones and brain. The timeline we'd been discussing, 3 to 4 months, suddenly became 6 to 8 weeks, maybe less. I'm sorry, David, Dr. Martinez said, her clinical professionalism cracking slightly. We can manage your pain and symptoms, but the progression is too rapid for further treatment. Sarah gripped my hand during the appointment, playing the devoted wife perfectly, but I saw the calculation in her eyes when Dr. Martinez mentioned the accelerated timeline. 6 weeks, instead of 3 months, meant less time for people to ask questions. We should discuss end-of-life planning, I said as we drove home. I want to make sure everything is in order. Of course, Sarah replied, her voice appropriately somber. Whatever you need to do. The new prognosis meant we had to move faster. Marcus and I executed a series of documents that completely restructured my estate while maintaining the appearance of routine end-of-life planning. The Irrevocable Life Insurance Trust was established first, with my sister's children as beneficiaries. I signed documents transferring ownership of my policies to the trust, removing Sarah as beneficiary, but I gave Sarah paperwork that appeared to confirm her as beneficiary, documents that would prove meaningless when she tried to collect. This ensures that the life insurance proceeds will avoid probate, I explained to Sarah, showing her the fake documents. It'll be easier for you to access the money. Sarah smiled and signed where Marcus had indicated, unknowingly confirming the trust structure that excluded her. The retirement accounts were simpler. I contacted each plan administrator directly, changing beneficiaries to my sister's children while sending Sarah confirmation letters that appeared to maintain her as primary beneficiary. I want to make sure you're taken care of, I told Sarah as she reviewed the fake documents. You're so thoughtful, Sarah replied, kissing my forehead. Even now, you're taking care of me. The house was transferred to a qualified personal residence trust that would eventually benefit my sister's children, though Sarah would have the right to live there for 1 year after my death, long enough for the criminal investigation to unfold. This protects the house from probate and estate taxes, I explained to her, and it ensures you'll have a place to live while you're getting everything sorted out. The final piece was a new will that appeared to leave everything to Sarah, but actually directed all assets through the trusts that excluded her. I've left everything to you, I told Sarah as she witnessed the signing, but it's structured to minimize taxes. I trust you completely, Sarah said. You've always been so good with financial planning. She had no idea that she was witnessing a document that would leave her with nothing. Throughout this process, my surveillance revealed that Sarah and Tom were becoming increasingly anxious about the accelerated timeline. Their recorded conversations showed they were both preparing for the financial windfall they expected from my death. I'd also retained attorney Jennifer Walsh, who specialized in financial crimes. She reviewed my evidence and confirmed that Sarah's actions constituted several criminal offenses. Financial abuse of a terminally ill spouse, insurance fraud, conspiracy, Jennifer explained to me during our meeting. The evidence you've gathered is comprehensive. I authorized Jennifer to begin filing complaints with appropriate agencies and initiating investigations. She would coordinate with Marcus to ensure the criminal investigation didn't interfere with estate planning. As I lay in my hospital bed during my final admission, I felt a strange sense of completion. My plan was in motion, supported by professional legal advice and documented evidence. Sarah thought my death would be her liberation. Instead, it would be the beginning of her destruction. From my hospital bed, I watched Sarah play the grieving wife for the medical staff, but I knew she was calculating how much longer she'd have to maintain the charade. "Dr. Martinez says it could be any day now," Sarah said during one of her visits. "I want you to know that I'll be okay. You don't have to worry about me." "I'm not worried about you, Sarah," I replied, my voice weak but my meaning clear. "I've made sure everything is taken care of." She smiled, thinking she understood what I meant. She had no idea that everything included her complete financial ruin and criminal prosecution. As I drifted in and out of consciousness during my final days, I felt deep satisfaction. Sarah had been right about one thing. I wouldn't be around much longer. But she'd been wrong about everything else. My death wouldn't be her liberation. It would be her destruction. David died on a Tuesday morning in November, with Sarah holding his hand and whispering promises about keeping his memory alive. The medical staff was moved by her apparent devotion, unaware that she was calculating how quickly she could access his life insurance benefits. Marcus called Sarah the next day to schedule a meeting about the estate. As executor, he was responsible for initiating the probate process. Sarah agreed to meet at his office, expecting a routine discussion about inheriting David's estate. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Marcus said when Sarah arrived at his office. "David spoke about you often during our recent meetings." "He was a good man," Sarah replied, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "I just want to handle everything the way he would have wanted." Marcus spread the paperwork across his conference table, the will, trust documents, insurance policies, and beneficiary designations. Sarah reviewed them carefully, her expression growing confused, as she realized the documents were different from what she'd expected. "I don't understand," Sarah said, pointing to the life insurance trust documents. "These show the benefits going to Rachel's children, but David showed me paperwork that confirmed me as the beneficiary." "Those were preliminary documents," Marcus explained smoothly. "David made final changes to his estate plan in the weeks before his death. Everything was properly executed and witnessed." Sarah's face went pale as she realized the scope of what had happened. The life insurance benefits, the retirement accounts, the house, everything was structured to bypass her completely. "This can't be right," Sarah said, her voice rising. "David wouldn't have done this. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly." "Actually, David was very clear about his intentions," Marcus replied calmly. "He had a cognitive assessment performed specifically to document his competence. Dr. Martinez confirmed that his decision-making capacity was intact." Sarah tried to contest the estate documents, but Marcus had anticipated every possible challenge. The medical documentation proved David's competence. The legal documents were properly executed, and the estate planning was conducted with professional legal advice. But Sarah's real problems were just beginning. 2 days after the estate meeting, Sarah received a call from her insurance company. The claim investigator had questions about discrepancies in her statements regarding David's condition. The investigation that Marcus had triggered months earlier was now in full swing. The investigation revealed that Sarah had made false statements about David's cognitive decline, had misrepresented his medical condition, and had been planning to benefit from his death before he was even terminally ill. The insurance company denied all claims and referred the matter to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Tom's life began unraveling simultaneously. The ethics investigation revealed that he had accessed client information inappropriately and had conflicts of interest with multiple clients. His insurance license was suspended and his employer terminated his employment. The memorial service became a public revelation of Sarah's misconduct through the testimony of David's family. Rachel spoke about her brother's final months, including his concerns about Sarah's behavior and his decision to reconnect with his family. "David was always protective of his family," Rachel said during her eulogy. "In his final months, he made sure that his legacy would support the people he loved most, his niece and nephew, who will use his life insurance benefits for their education." The congregation was confused by the reference to benefits going to David's niece and nephew rather than his wife, but Sarah couldn't challenge the statement without revealing her own expectations. The investigation accelerated over the following weeks. Jennifer Walsh provided law enforcement with the comprehensive evidence file David had assembled. The recordings of Sarah and Tom's conversations were particularly damaging, revealing their callous attitude toward David's death and their detailed planning around his life insurance benefits. Criminal charges were filed 3 months after David's death: financial abuse of a vulnerable adult, insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit fraud, and theft. Tom was charged as a co-conspirator, facing additional charges related to his professional misconduct. Sarah's attempt to hire a criminal defense attorney was complicated by her financial situation. The estate she'd expected to inherit was tied up in trusts that excluded her. The insurance claims had been denied, and her legal fees were mounting rapidly. "Your husband documented everything," her attorney explained during their first meeting. "Financial transactions, conversations, photographs, timelines. This is the most comprehensive white-collar crime case I've ever seen assembled by a victim." "Him was dying," Sarah protested. "He wasn't thinking clearly." "The medical records show he was competent throughout the period when he gathered this evidence," the attorney replied. "More problematically, the evidence shows your affair and financial planning began before his diagnosis." Sarah's relationship with Tom deteriorated rapidly as they faced criminal prosecution and financial ruin. Their romantic relationship, built on the expectation of financial gain, couldn't survive the reality of criminal liability and poverty. The criminal trial began 8 months after David's death. The prosecution's case was devastating, built on David's meticulously documented evidence and supported by professional testimony. The recordings of Sarah and Tom's conversations were played for the jury, their callous words about David's death echoing through the courtroom. "He won't be around much longer anyway. The cancer's doing our work for us." Sarah's voice, cold and calculating, destroying any possibility of sympathy. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Sarah was convicted on all charges. Tom was convicted of conspiracy and professional misconduct. Both faced significant prison sentences and restitution orders. Sarah was sentenced to 4 years in state prison and ordered to pay full restitution. Tom received 3 years and lost his professional licenses permanently. Under the state's Slayer statute, Sarah's criminal conviction disqualified her from inheriting anything from David's estate. 2 years after David's death, the Patterson Cancer Support Foundation had distributed over $200,000 in grants to families facing terminal illness. The foundation, funded by David's life insurance proceeds and managed by his sister Rachel, provided practical support for people dealing with the same challenges David had faced. David's niece and nephew were thriving in college, their education fully funded by the trusts he'd established. They knew about Sarah's betrayal and criminal conviction, understanding it as a cautionary tale about the importance of integrity and family loyalty. Sarah's attempts to rebuild her life after prison were hampered by her criminal record and the comprehensive documentation of her crimes. She eventually moved to another state, working minimum-wage jobs and living in subsidized housing. Tom's situation was similarly bleak. His professional reputation was permanently destroyed, his relationship with his children was irreparably damaged, and his financial situation was precarious. The letter David had written to be read at the Foundation's annual memorial provided his final thoughts. "Terminal illness teaches you what matters most: family, integrity, and ensuring that your life has meaning beyond your death. I discovered that my wife was planning to benefit from my illness and was counting on my death as a business opportunity. I used my remaining time to ensure that my assets would create a positive legacy rather than enabling someone who had betrayed our marriage vows. Sarah was right that I wouldn't be around much longer. She was wrong about everything else. Death gave me clarity about what mattered: protecting what I had built, ensuring justice for betrayal, and leaving a legacy that would outlast us both. She planned for my death. I planned for her life without me." The foundation continued to grow, helping families maintain their dignity during medical crises. David's investigation file had become legendary in estate planning circles, a perfect example of how professional expertise, legal strategy, and moral clarity could triumph over betrayal. Sarah's prediction that David wouldn't be around much longer had been accurate, but her assumption that his death would benefit her had been catastrophically wrong. David's final months had been his most productive, using his terminal diagnosis as motivation for the most important work of his life, ensuring that justice prevailed. The cancer had taken his life, but it had also given him the clarity to create lasting victory over those who tried to exploit his death. His death had been inevitable. Sarah's destruction had been chosen. And that's the end of today's story. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a thumbs up and drop a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm push my content further. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep creating more stories for you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.